Today we will be discussing Steph Curry's shot process in order of the kinetic chain.
His starting position is anatomical while holding the ball. His right and left elbow as well as his knees are flexed. His right wrist is pronated while the left is in a neutral position.
During the loading motion phase, movements include ankle dorsiflexion with the eccentric contraction in the sagittal plane, and the muscles involved are the gastrocnemius, the soleus, and the tibialis posterior. And then we have knee flexion with the eccentric contraction in the sagittal plane, and the muscles involved are the rectus femoris, vastus medialis, vastus lateralis, and the vastus intermedius. Then we have hip flexion with the eccentric contraction in the sagittal plane, and muscles involved are the gluteus maximus, the gluteus medius, the semitendinosus, semimembranosus, and the biceps femoris. And then we have shoulder abduction with a concentric contraction in the frontal plane, and the muscles involved are the deltoid, pectoralis major, supraspinatus, biceps brachii. And finally, we have elbow extension with the eccentric contraction in the sagittal plane, and those muscles involved are the biceps brachii, the brachialis, the brachioradialis, the extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis, and the flexor carpi ulnaris and radialis, and the palmaris longus.
During the upward motion phase, movements include ankle plantar flexion with a concentric contraction in the sagittal plane. The muscles involved are the gastrocnemius, the soleus, and tibialis posterior. Knee extension with a concentric contraction in the sagittal plane as well. Muscles involved are the rectus femoris, vastus medialis, vastus lateralis, and vastus intermedius. Next is hip extension with a concentric contraction in the sagittal plane. Muscles involved are the glute max, glute med, semitendinosus, semimembranosus, and the biceps femoris. Shoulder flexion with a concentric contraction in the sagittal plane. Muscles involved are the deltoid, coracobrachialis, and the biceps brachii. Next is elbow extension with a concentric contraction in the sagittal plane. Muscles involved are the biceps brachii, brachialis, brachioradialis, extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis, flexor carpi ulnaris and radialis, and the palmaris longus. Next is right wrist extension with the eccentric contraction in the sagittal plane. These muscles involved are the flexor carpi radialis and ulnaris, palmaris longus, flexor pollicus longus, flexor digitorum superficialis, and flexor digitorum profundus. Also, right wrist flexion with a concentric contraction in the sagittal plane. Muscles involved are the flexor carpi radialis and ulnaris, palmaris longus, flexor pollicus longus, flexor digitorum superficialis, and the flexor digitorum profundus. Lastly is finger flexion with a concentric contraction in the sagittal plane. These muscles involved are the flexor digitorum superficialis and the flexor digitorum profundus.
And finally, the downward motion phase. And in this phase, all motions will occur in the sagittal plane. The movements include ankle dorsiflexion with the eccentric contraction and ankle plantar flexion with a concentric contraction. The muscles involved are the gastrocnemius, the soleus, and the tibialis posterior. Then we have knee flexion with the eccentric contraction and knee extension with a concentric contraction. And these muscles are the rectus femoris, the vastus medialis, vastus lateralis, and the vastus intermedius. Hip flexion is next with the eccentric contraction and also hip extension with a concentric contraction. And these muscles include the glute max, the glute medius, the semitendinosus, semimembranosus, and the biceps femoris. Shoulder extension is with the eccentric contraction, and these muscles involved are the deltoid, the coracobrachialis, and the biceps brachii. Then we have right elbow flexion with the eccentric contraction, and the muscles involved are the triceps brachii, the extensor carpi ulnaris, and the anconeus. The left elbow is extension and has eccentric contraction, and the muscles involved are the biceps brachii, the brachialis, the brachioradialis, the extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis, and the flexor carpi ulnaris and radialis, and the palmaris longus. And then we have right wrist extension with the eccentric contraction, and these muscles involved are the flexor carpi radialis and ulnaris, the palmaris longus, the flexor pollicis longus, flexor digitorum superficialis, and the flexor digitorum profundus. And then on the right finger, we have extension with the eccentric contraction, and the muscles involved are the flexor digitorum superficialis and the flexor digitorum profundus.
When Steph Curry is finished shooting his shot, his ending position results in his hip flexion, knee flexion, ankle dorsiflexion, and his upper body is in a neutral position.
In terms of center of gravity, which is the point on the body in which weight acts regardless of the orientation of the body relative to the ground, in Steph's upward motion phase, the center of gravity is higher on the body, and in his downward phase, the center of gravity returns to the original location. All muscles and joints working together help to create the dynamic movement of a jump shot.
The one thing Steph lacks from the ideal position of shooting a jump shot is his vertical.
And that concludes our fantastic video. Thank you.